Seems like a lot of the way you made this is by taking off-the-shelf parts and sort of MacGyvering them together.
Yeah, pretty much.
Does that not raise anybody's eyebrows in the industry?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, I'm definitely an outlier. There were a lot of rules out there that didn't make engineering sense to me.
It seems like he's swashbuckling a little bit. It seems like he's trying to be provocative a little bit.
We partnered with aerospace experts at the University of Washington, NASA, and Boeing on the design of our hull.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. One word in particular stood out from that clip where you hear the CBS's David Pogue talking about Stockton Rush. What word stood out to you? Well, for me it was this one.
Swashbuckling.
It means engaging in daring and romantic adventures with bravado or flamboyance. Also daring and romantic adventure. But it's typically associated with sailors, with pirates, with some kind of shipping type scenario. And it's this word, as well as this idea that Stockton Rush is a direct descendant of both Benjamin Rush and Richard Stockton, who were signers of the Declaration of Independence. And so we want to find out about the history of this family and of this man. And when we dig a little into the past, what comes out is pretty astonishing in terms of this idea of history repeating itself. In effect, what we're talking about is this idea of like father, like son. But instead of that, try like great-grandfather, like great-grandson, except there's nothing great about this skeleton buried deep in the family closet. If we go back in time, roughly 180 years ago, to September and October 1843, we find a certain ship steaming down the Delaware River away from Philadelphia and bound for New York. This ship. The man behind the construction of the ship, the USS Princeton, was none other than Captain Robert Stockton. Now, although the direct supervision of the construction was done by another man, John Ericsson, a Swedish inventor, the ship was named after the hometown of the prominent Stockton family, Princeton. That's Princeton in New Jersey. And of course it was placed under the captaincy of Stockton himself. On November 22nd, 1843, Captain Stockton announced, "Princeton will be ready for sea in a week." In a very real sense, the USS Princeton was a new innovation. It was the first ship with screw propellers powered by an engine mounted below the waterline to protect them from gunfire. Glossing over all that, we see someone in charge of engineering a new kind of ship, although he isn't an engineer and he isn't really doing the engineering. This ship also tows other ships and is part of elaborate marketing campaigns aimed at trying to get the public to appreciate the idea of naval expansion. And now, this is where it gets interesting.
Are you sure you want to hear this?
Before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Welcome to the thousands of you who have subscribed. If you want to follow me on Twitter, you can go to @CrimeRocket. And I put a lot of the new videos and announcements of live discussions on Twitter. So I'll also put a link to my Twitter profile in the description, so you can click on the link and follow me there. If you're enjoying this episode, please like, share, leave a comment. You can also hit the thanks button, and let's get started. Now, besides the basic design of the ship itself, other innovations included a new kind of cannon known as a carronade. Think of a cannon as a rifle and a carronade as a kind of sword or shotgun. There was also a single long gun on board. According to Wikipedia, the gun was a smooth bore muzzle loader made of wrought iron and was built by Mersey Iron Works in Liverpool, England. Seems like at that time a lot of the best technology was being manufactured in places like England and also Ireland. The Titanic was built in Belfast. And so this muzzle loader could fire a 225 pound or 102 kilogram 12-inch or 300 millimeter shot 5 miles, that's 8 kilometers, using a 50-pound or 23-kilogram charge, right? So just think about that, a 225-pound kind of ball that can travel 5 miles or 8 kilometers. This revolutionary design used built-up construction, placing red-hot iron hoops around the breech end of the weapon, which pre-tensioned the gun and greatly increased the charge the breech could withstand. And so what we're dealing with now is this idea of innovative materials used to strengthen, in this case, a ship's cannon. And so the name of this weapon was originally the Orator, and that was a name conferred by the Swedish dude Ericsson. But Stockton stepped in and renamed it the Oregon gun. Now bear in mind, the Titan was originally called Cyclops II, and then Stockton renamed it Titan. And it was a name that was uncomfortably close to another submersible called Triton. This cannon was shipped to the United States in 1841, where it was tested, reinforced to prevent cracks, and proof-fired more than 150 times. So what you have here is a scenario of a device with a chamber that's being tested in order to be declared safe and functional. And so according to Wikipedia, Captain Stockton wanted his ship to carry 2 long guns, not just one. And so he kind of stepped in and he designed and directed the construction of Peacemaker, which was another 12-inch 300mm muzzle loader. This one was built by Hogan Delameter of New York City. And I think this is kind of approximate to him having this huge plexiglass window, Stockton Rush having this big window in the sub. He wanted something bigger and better than everyone else. And so he called this cannon Peacemaker, and he built it with older forging technology, right? Again, an analogy to Boeing's old carbon fiber that was past its sell-by date. And so using this older forging technology, they created a larger gun of more impressive appearance, but lower strength. Again, does that ring a bell? In other words, what Richard Stockton did was he took someone else's idea and tried to come up with his own invention and fucked that up. Stockton rushed Peacemaker and mounted it without much testing. See? Déjà vu. Have we heard this story before? According to Kilner, Peacemaker was fired only 5 times before certifying it as accurate and fully proved. Did you just read the word certifying? In the context of a certain Stockton? Yes, you did. Did you read the word in the context of the certifying not being done correctly? Yes, you did. Now, what he was trying to do is attempting to copy the Oregon gun, but not understanding the importance of Ericsson's hoop construction. And this again is another analogy for an aviation engineer who successfully used glass fiber on his experimental craft, but then not understanding how this applies to a pressure hull. And so Richard Stockton instead heavily reinforced this construction of the breech simply by making the metal of the gun thicker, right? And that is again an analogy to putting loops and loops and loops of carbon fiber around the central stainless steel hull. And in this case, he ended up with a weight of more than 27 pounds. That's 12,000 kilograms, more than half again as heavy as the Oregon gun. And so where one Stockton tried to build a cannon and make it more impressive by making it heavier, while not really understanding the construction process, the other tried to build a submersible while not really understanding the construction process for certified craft or why these designs were necessary. According to Wikipedia, this produced a gun with the typical weakness of a wrought iron gun, the breech unable to withstand the transverse forces of the charge, and this meant it was almost certain to burst at some point. And so in terms of that paragraph, substitute the words carbon fiber there, and you have an almost perfect description of what Stockton Rush's submersible faced, a vehicle that was almost certain to burst inwards at a certain point. Now we jump to February 28th, where the USS Princeton departed Alexandria, Virginia, on a demonstration cruise down the Potomac with Tyler, I think that's President Tyler, and members of his cabinet. Former First Lady Dolly Madison, Senators Thomas Hart Benton of Missouri, Nathaniel P. Talmadge of New York, William K. Bell Rivers of Virginia, and so on and so on. So a lot of big shots, just like Hamish Harding was kind of a big shot, and P.H. Nargile is a big shot. And you hear about all of these really important people that are apparently, like the writer of The Simpsons and all these people that are going along as guests. In other words, important and wealthy guests were on board, and so Captain Stockton wanted to impress them. And so according to this Wikipedia page, I'll put a link to it in the description, Captain Stockton decided to fire the larger of the ship's two long guns, Peacemaker, his gun, to impress his guests. So it's a little bit like Stockton Rush going down in the sub himself to show, and also, using this Logitech controller and flourishing that in front of the cameras to show how clever and innovative he is. He's doing it directly. And so what happened was Peacemaker, this cannon, was fired 3 times on the trip downriver and then was loaded to fire a salute to George Washington as the ship passed Mount Vernon on the return trip. So once again, it's sort of several times something is used, and so it seems to be okay. Just like Titan was used a couple of times, seems to be okay. And so the guests aboard viewed the first set of firings, then retired below decks for lunch and refreshments. Secretary Gilmer then urged those aboard to view a final shot with a Peacemaker. And again, this is similar to the final mission of the Titan during the 2023 season. What happens during this final use of this weakened material, something that's also enduring a kind of cyclical wearing down? Well, when Stockton pulled the firing lanyard of this cannon, the gun burst. Its left side failed, spraying hot metal across the deck and fragmentation into the crowd. 6 men were instantly killed. 180 years later, history would repeat itself with a similar number of men killed and a Stockton in charge, but that wasn't the end of it. According to the Wikipedia article, plans to construct more ships modeled on Princeton were promptly scrapped, and we've just heard that OceanGate has suspended all operations. Then there was a court of inquiry that investigated the cause of the explosion and found that all those involved had taken appropriate precautions. At Stockton's request, the Committee of Science and Arts conducted its own inquiry, which criticized many details of the manufacturing process, but of course not him. Erickson, whom Stockton had originally paid $1,150 for designing and outfitting Princeton, sought another $15,000 for his additional efforts and expertise. He also sued Stockton for payment and won in court, but the funds were never appropriated. In other words, Erickson was a sort of Swedish version of Lockridge. Bottom line, although he was the deviser of the defective gun, Captain Stockton's political influence allowed him to be absolved of all responsibility for that February 1844 explosion of the gun called Peacemaker on board the ship. In the aftermath, the Peacemaker disaster prompted a re-examination of the process used to manufacture cannons. This led to the development of new techniques that produced cannons that were stronger and more structurally sound. Let's hope the same protocols are developed for commercial submersibles as well. I'm not going to take it further than that, but I do want to discuss this whole idea of you have a disaster, you have a tragedy, and then should the company fold? Should OceanGate fold? Will it fold? Has it folded? And we're going to deal with that through the intertextuality with the movie Rust. So look out for that analysis in the next episode. I also want to continue to get to know some of the victims of the Titan tragedy. And so we'll be doing an analysis, just trying to get to know P.H. Nargile in more detail. So look out for that as well. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.